Welcome to Burning the Couch with Pim and Micaela. Although we are licensed therapists, please note that information in this podcast should not replace psychotherapy, clinical supervision, or be taken as legal or medical advice.
Privacy is important to us, so all people, places, and scenarios mentioned in this podcast have been changed to protect client confidentiality. Also, we don't condone literally burning your couch. And a special thanks and shout out to C-Cop Studios for the awesome music we're using in this podcast.
Hey everyone, so you've graduated and now what? We're going to be talking about any training, certifications that people usually do when they're done with school, traineeship, all of that stuff, getting a job. I know for me, I was quite anxious after I was done with school because I've been in school for so long, right? Like you've K to 12, then you've done your undergrad, then grad school. And so it just feels like it's a bunch of school and not being sure what to do afterwards.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions. I think there's this period of time where you've graduated, you're waiting for, the board to process your paperwork so you can actually go get a job, and kind of feeling lost of, I don't know where to go from here.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can share some of our experience of what we've done right after graduation. I know for me, I think back about my own graduation, like for the master's, and I felt like I should have gotten my makeup done. I know this sounds stupid, but so what ended up happening during our year was Michaela and I still had to take our comp exam, I think the week or 2 weeks after we walked. So the ceremony was first and we still had to do the comp. So I was just super anxious about taking the comprehensive exam that I wasn't even thinking about graduation day. Plus, we had both applied to the doctoral program as well. So I knew there was more school to be had. So I just didn't even bother with like looking nice for my ceremony. And unfortunately, I got my doctorate during COVID and didn't get to have a ceremony for that.
Not
It's a
yet.
bummer.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Our fingers
2 years later, I will.
spring.
Oh my gosh. I know. 2 years later.
Yeah. So I think we have a unique situation because once we graduated from the master's program, we were going right into a doctoral program. So there was no real gap from school or break from school, really. So there was a little delay for me to go find a job. I think I did one fall semester without a job because I was in school and it was definitely a transition. But a lot of people, they want to get into the workforce right away, start collecting their hours. And it can be really stressful of even knowing how to get a job doing therapy. And they are different types of interviews, right? It's not like an interview you've probably had before for a therapist position, right?
Yeah. And because you and I had both did our practicum at a children's hospital where we worked with kids, I kind of just fell into that if I'll try to look for a position that has to do with kids again, just because it's on my resume. Like I didn't even think about, specializing in something else or trying something different. So I think I just went on Indeed and I typed therapist and there's a lot of county stuff for sure. Right. That came up.
Yeah. And I would say last week we just had an episode on community mental health. I would say one of the pros we didn't talk about is getting hours as far as counting them for licensure. You'll get a lot of hours working in the county. whether it's documentation or consultations, things like that, you know, you will get the hours for clinical stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk about getting the actual job. So, what does that look like? I think the interview looks a lot different. There was a lot of like personality
Vignettes.
matching
Oh,
vignettes.
mhm.
Yeah. I think personality match was one because I feel like, well, it depends. If you're working in the county, maybe not so much. If it's county kind of positions, I feel like I had vignettes. I feel like I had what was your clinical experience? What population? What kind of model have you done? Or do you know any type of manualized treatment already? I think those were the things that came up. And then when I was in more like private practice interviews, there were still vignettes, but it was a lot of personality fit. So, we already have 5 clinicians that are like a certain way. So if you're going to be the sixth one, we want something different. We don't want also female, also short, also,
Using solution
quirky,
focused.
using solution focus or also doing play therapy that we want to diversify.
Yeah, and that I would say one of the other things that I encountered when interviewing for county placements were they asked you very in-depth questioning on diagnosing. So you had to know especially if you're working with severe mental illness, they will ask you questions about diagnosing as well and safety stuff. So just to see how you would respond. And sometimes it's you writing a paragraph in response to a vignette, right? That's part of your interview. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that might look a little different. That's kind of intimidating, or it was at first, but you know the stuff, right? You're just fresh out of school. You know more than you think you know.
Yeah, and I think you need to still set yourself apart from others, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody has a master's now that's trying to go for this position. Everybody, well, I wouldn't want to say everybody knows CBT, but like a lot of us know CBT,
If you
right?
don't, then I don't know what school you went to.
Yeah, or like solution focus, like some of the common ones. And don't be afraid to say that you want to learn more, right? That you don't have experience on something. And this is where you want to gain experience because you're still considered like an associate. You're not fully licensed yet, and they know that.
The other thing where if it's like a group private practice or something like that, and they are very specialized with working with a specific population, a lot of times they do like you right out of grad school before you've had extensive training in all these other things. They get to actually train you the way they want their practice running and how they want treatment to look like, right? So I've had that experience too, where they actually like people right out of grad school because they're fresh and eager to learn, and
Mm-hmm.
you know they can actually like absorb the model that they want you working with.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever applied at a place, Michaela, where you just feel like it wasn't a good fit, but you just really wanted the job because you needed to have a job, or at least that's what we
um
thought we needed? Because that
yeah,
was me.
I remember interviewing at a school. It was a county program, but it was basically I would be working in the schools and like pulling kids out of class to do therapy with them. And I remember because I had worked with kids, I was like, okay, this sounds like it would be more comfortable for me because I know how to do therapy with kids at this point. And at the same time, I just heard like stories about how there's no room, there's no office, you have to like do therapy in a closet sometimes, or um
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. I wasn't like drawn to it because this is my passion. This is what I wanted to do, is work in schools. I never really cared about working in schools. I just went with this is what I know so far. I didn't end up getting the position, but I think that was probably a good thing. That's
Yeah.
another kind of mindset thing that I have is if I don't get this job or I don't get accepted here, or it doesn't work out for some reason, it's not the job for me. And that has definitely been a truthful thing. I think I've experienced different types of placements, and I was exactly where I needed to be at that time. In fact, I've applied somewhere and I didn't even get a response from submitting my resume. And then 2 years later, I applied again and I got the job, and they loved me and it was a great fit. But I wasn't ready until then. So
Mhm.
you'll end up where you're supposed to be. You kind of have to think of it that way.
Yeah, that's a good mindset to have because I think when I finished school, I was so pressured of like, okay, well, I got a master's now. And so I feel like I need to have a job right away, or like um I didn't want to be like jobless with a master's degree and a ton of student debt, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, I need to start my hours right away. I need to have a job. I need to make money. And so I felt like I was trying to fit in what each of these companies wanted to see rather than just being myself and then like letting things fall into place. So, for example, I would walk into an agency and it just doesn't feel right for me. The vibe feels off, or it's a population that I know I would probably hate working with or not be good with. But I was like, oh, whatever, I just need a job. Or it was like one of those where you had to like drive to the client's house. And I don't like doing that, nor do I want to.
Oh
But
yeah. Anything driving to I don't want to, no driving to houses. Some people like that, but I can't.
Well, I've done that before with ABA and I didn't like it. It didn't work for me at all. And but I was of course eager and newly graduated and I was like, yes, yes to everything. um, but you live and you learn. So what are some things that maybe would help our listeners in terms of, I don't know, things to look out for in getting a job for the first time in the therapy world?
Yeah, I think kind of what you said, what sets you apart from others, and really making that clear in your cover letter. Um, I think getting as much information of what your job duties would look like and who you're going to be working with is huge, because it's not just, is the company a good fit? It's who's going to be supervising me, who's going to be giving me clinical supervision. Can I meet them beforehand, or are they the one interviewing me? Right.
That's a good one. Yeah. I would
Yeah.
say if you can, meet the person that's going to supervise you before you accept the job because the place might be great, the population might be great, but you might be given a really shitty supervisor or no supervision at all. I've actually had some colleagues of ours that accepted positions where they had to pay out of pocket for supervision outside of their agency.
Yeah. And that is definitely not preferred. There are plenty of jobs that do offer clinical supervision, and sometimes that's the rationale for, lower pay as a associate or trainee or something like that, is because you are taking more time from the company and resources from the company by their supervision. So if they're not offering that and you have to pay out of pocket, kind of also considering financially, does this make sense, right?
And don't work
And
for
also,
free.
yeah, and don't work for free, guys. Don't do it. It's um
Yeah, there will be a place that will pay you. I think some people are so eager to get hours that they're willing to accept anything, including, at a master's level, taking minimum wage jobs or something that's like a really, really low rate for someone with a master's level clinical work. Right. And then having to like pick up a part time job somewhere else to make their ends meet.
right. Right. And that we've touched on that quite a bit, but another reminder, don't work for free.
Yeah.
um yeah, you have so much experience and so much education behind you at this point that it's invaluable. So definitely make sure you're getting something. Um But kind of back to the supervision, it's Also looking at what is this person's qualifications that's going to be supervising me? Do they maybe have credentials that I am interested in also learning about, or having that background in my pocket, right? Experience and that good stuff. So what about for you, Pim? What do you think is important aside from like supervision and not working for free? What would be your piece of
Um,
advice as far as finding a job?
yeah. I think I want to touch more on knowing what your duties are, right? Because I was definitely in positions where I had the impression I would only be doing clinical work, but it ends up me being like driving clients from place to place, doing case management work. I don't know, like clean the agency, even just things like that. That was like, okay, this was not part of my job description. Right. And I think a lot of times in agency work, or okay, so let me back up. When you're in grad school, you're only mainly taught about like clinical work, right? They um, talk about how to, as they should, talk about how to be a clinician, talk about the different models or theories, interventions, psychological um, diagnoses, all these things. And then out in the real world, I think there are a lot of agencies that are underfunded and tries to have mental health clinicians do more than just therapy work. So I think
Mhm.
that's something to ask your interviewer and really research the job. See if you can talk to maybe another clinician that works there, right? Like, what are your main duties? What do you do from day to day? Do you just see clients? Do you need to do outreach? Do you need to attend meetings? Do you need to do case management? All these other things as well, because I was definitely caught by surprise on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, especially if you're driving clients, and I remember, we did have to, like, clean stuff at the agency sometimes, and not that I'm above cleaning, I don't mind taking out the trash from my office, that's not like, you don't have to tell me to do that, um, but if there's those other things that are not necessarily clinical that is gonna be required of you, it's important to know. It's also important to ask, what does the caseload look like? What are the expectations of how many people you would like me to see in a week or even in a day? Because if you're required to be seeing clients, 7, 8 clients in a day, and you know yourself, that's a lot, maybe this may not be the position for you, right? Or maybe you're trying to get more hours and they can only guarantee you, 5 clients a week. And that might not be enough to hit your goals for licensure. So that's going to be huge. Um, is asking, what does the caseload look like?
That's a good one. And I think every licensure has different requirements of what you can count as well. So check in on that to see does this job provide you with all the hours that you'll need, right? So for example, when we were getting licensed, we were able to count like group supervision, which helped a lot because, for example, if your agency provided one group a week and an individual supervision a week as well. You can see how many hours you'd get from that. If they offered any trainings, those were able to be counted. I know things have probably changed since we were licensed, and it depends on the licensure too. But it's a good thing to check on.
Absolutely. And get your hours signed frequently, especially if you are in, a bigger company where people are coming and going a lot, or you've had maybe multiple supervisors, right? Because your supervisor could leave. Um, I had a supervisor that was like, if I'm in an accident or something terrible happens and you didn't get my signature, that's on you.
Right.
Not that we have to go doom and gloom, but you never know what happens. And so making it a habit of getting your hours signed regularly is important. Making sure that everything is signed that needs to be signed, because the supervisors aren't going to be reminding you at this point.
Yeah. I had a professor that had said she had a student once whose supervisor had passed, and after 2 years, like nothing was signed.
Exactly.
It was in like a smaller kind of place where there wasn't any other supervisor as well that could sign off on it. So she had to redo all her hours. So that scared me. Michaela knows that I get my hours signed pretty much weekly. I was very crazy about it to the point where I would scan it weekly as well. So then I'd have an electronic copy on my computer, and then I would put it in a binder and then put it in a fireproof safe. That's how crazy I was about my hours.
So if you know Pim by this point, this is very much how she is with when she does something, she does it so well where it's foolproof, and even fireproof at some points. But
I was
but
really scared. I would have
yeah.
nightmares about like, oh my God, I've done like, 3,000 hours. It's been years of work. And then now it's, all caught on fire. I don't know. I had nightmares about it. It's not like that now. Like, cause you still have to keep all your stuff in case you get audited. It's definitely not in a fireproof safe at this point, but it's still in a neat binder.
Yeah. And so for me, I wasn't as extreme, but I at least got mine signed every month. Uh, and then I made sure I had a copy, like save it to a Google Drive or send it to my email. So it's somewhere where I can find it in the event that my house burns down. I still have access to that. That's super important. I would also say, it, somewhat related, is keep your syllabus from the class, keep your syllabi from all your courses that you've taken, if you still have them, or if you have friends that took the same class, if they can send you a copy, it wouldn't hurt to keep those together as well, because there are some trainings and certifications that want to know what kind of coursework you've taken that might count towards the training or certification, right? And all of that is important when you're trying to set yourself apart and get jobs and look desirable to a company, or unique maybe.
Yeah, that's actually was the case for me. So, for those of you that know, I'm also a registered play therapist. So, I have an extra certification. And I would say half of my education for that certificate was because I took a course on play therapy, a whole semester of it in grad school. And the professor teaching that class happened to be a play therapist supervisor. So, I didn't even think about doing that certification at that point in time, but luckily I still had the syllabus. And I was able to get that to the association, and they approved it, and they counted all the lecture hours actually into continuing education hours.
Yeah. And even recently, because for our licensure renewal in California, they are requiring, I think it's like 6 units or something, of 6 CEUs around suicide and suicide prevention,
Right.
um, which can be covered in coursework in your master's level course, which at this point, I'm pretty sure everyone covers that. But having that documentation of, I have the syllabus and these are the weeks we went over X, Y, and Z, and now I have some proof behind, my courses. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's always good just to have that if you're able to, if you haven't thrown them away at this point yet.
Yeah, I keep those too, by the way. Not in a fireproof safe, but it's on my computer.
I actually got a fireproof safe just because of you. And I put a lot of different, not clinical stuff necessarily, but I'm definitely like, what if the house burns down?
I have a deathly fear that someone will frame me for murder, or that like all my identification materials will burn away and now no one knows who I am, even though I try to prove that I'm a US citizen and here's my social security number. I literally like that is my big fear. So,
Well, you know what? If that did come true, at least you'd be wiped of your debt.
good point. Good point.
Silver lining,
um,
reframe.
Oh my God. I think we should talk about that. We should talk about student loan debt because grad school is expensive. if you're one of the lucky ones that don't have any student loans, well, lucky you. For a lot of us that do, it is quite expensive. So something to consider. Kristen actually touched on this in the community mental health episode, but we talked about, and if you haven't listened to that episode, please do. I think it relates to this episode in that if you get a job after grad school, it might be in the community. So, Kristen talked about doing the public service loan. So, if you've worked in a nonprofit agency for 10 years, you might have your loan forgiven. That's something that you can consider, you know, having to calculate your finances, right? Your student loans are going to kick back in now that you're done with school. So, should you be taking this job, even though it gives you a lot of hours, but maybe very little pay? That's something to think about.
Absolutely. And looking into what types of repayment options there are. I think typically you have about 6 months after graduation, and then you have to start paying back your loans typically. Um, and again, we're not necessarily like financial advisors or loan experts, but looking into the different types of payment options that's going to work best for you. I know there are like income based kind of options. So just keeping that in mind and what's realistic for what your expenses are.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So
Let's see what else. What other post graduation stuff? I think
what
licensure.
yeah,
Right. So, test prep, I think it's absolutely worth it. So, splurge on licensure test prep. I think it's absolutely worth it. It calmed my anxiety so much. I felt super ready doing it because I feel like, at least for us, it was the MFT, the California MFT exam. I'm sure this applies to other licensure exams too. It's, yes, the topic is important, the material is important, but I think it's also about how to actually take the test
that's
because,
what it is.
yeah, the questions can be confusing. It can be, um, I don't know, it tries to trick you, I guess. So I think it's important to know what the test will look like and how to take it rather than just memorizing all the different theories and clinical situations.
In fact, I would argue that you probably know enough material, but it is like what you said, Pim, learning how to read the question, learning how to read the answers and decipher, like rule out options. That process of test taking is really what this exam is about.
Right. Because, for example, it could ask you, like, what should you do versus what must you do? Or what could you do? Right.
And sometimes all the options are, well, you should do all of them. So what's the answer? You have to pick
Right.
the first one you should do first, like in order and sequential order.
Right.
What's the first thing you need to do? Um,
Right. Or like clinically, this is what you would do, but legally, this is what you should do.
and ethically, you should do this other thing. But that's a good point. And I think we use the TDC, so the Therapist Development Center. They have social work on there. They have MFTs. They
They have
have
the
the national.
national MFT. Hmm.
So that has been an awesome resource. I highly recommend Therapist Development Center, and I think their staff is pretty responsive too if you have questions or issues with stuff.
Oh my God, it was super helpful because I was getting a certain percentage on the exam prep and I felt super anxious. And I was like, oh my gosh, should I take the test or should I postpone it? Am I ready? And, I emailed them, asked them some questions, gave them what my scores were. And they're like, I think you'll be okay. You should go take it. It just eased my anxiety a lot. And I passed.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes those test prep exams are harder than the actual exam to prepare you.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, but other than like licensure process, which is typically like a couple of years away for people after graduation, another recommendation is to think about the population you're wanting to work with or you currently are working with, and different trainings and certifications. One of the biggest debates I think therapists have is like, do I do the EMDR training or not? do I
Yeah.
spend the money and do the EMDR training, or do I hold off and just think about it? And it's like this internal,
Yeah.
debate with ourselves.
We don't have answers for you, unfortunately, on that one.
Yeah, like a lot of colleagues of ours have gotten EMDR certified or are even EMDR trainers, and maybe we'll have one of them as a guest. That would be kind of cool. But I mean, it's amazing. EMDR there's nothing like it, and it is expensive. So, kind of thinking about, is that something you're wanting to do? You might not know yet.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes along with what's your, uh, I guess, view of therapy in the world. Like, I'm very much from the DBT world, so prolonged exposure is just so ingrained in me. And so that's kind of where I would probably gravitate towards for trauma work. But again, it's just preference. So, and it is expensive, but if you can get a deal, or if you have like a company that's willing to train you on it for a cheaper price,
I know they do group discounts. So if you have a big group of therapist friends who all want to get EMDR
that would
certified,
be
you
the
can do
best.
that. Right. I think like something important to consider just on the business aspect of things, if you eventually want to get into private practice, right? Or even if you want to, I don't know, move up in the company that you're working with. So just try to see if this will be worth it to get certified or to be certified in something. So there was a point in time when I considered getting certified to do the ADOS, which is like the autism diagnostic scale. And I strongly considered it. And at this time decided against it because I was like, well, how many of the ADOS will I be doing in my practice? Will that grow my practice in any way? Right. So taking that into consideration too, because if you're splurging thousands of dollars in EMDR, yes, you'll use it with your clients, but is that your main clientele? Are you going to be using that all the time? Can you advertise doing EMDR? Will that grow your practice or will you move up in your company? That's something to think about because as much as we love additional letters and certifications behind our name, under our name, it has to come down to, is it worth it? I mean, it sucks to think this way, but like, will I grow from this and will I be able to make money from it? Is it going to be worth all the extra stuff that I'm putting in? It's because it's an investment at the end of the
Right.
day.
Right. And if it is something that you're super passionate about and this is the kind of work you want to do, then it will be worth it. But again, there's so many trainings out there, you can't possibly be an expert in all of them. And I would
Right.
actually recommend not trying to be an expert in everything and really narrowing your niche, right? Coming up with an area of specialty that you want to work with. You're going to get more clients if you're very specific. If you're too broad, saying, I see everybody, I treat everything, I'm certified in everything, I am an eclectic therapist, there's a dime a dozen out there of those.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about, for Pim in our community, Pim is the child therapist. She is the child expert, or the autism, specialist. So that's kind of how we see her. And if you're too broad, it's going to be hard for people to choose you when there's so many other people who might be
Right.
charging a cheaper rate too. Um,
Right. I have like a long list of referrals to send to people, right? Just today, I was texting Michaela and was like, had a consultation and I really like the client. I want this client to be mine. However, the first clinician that popped up in my head was someone else that would be such a good fit. And that's what you want for yourself is you want people to be like, oh, you know what? This person would be a really good fit for this client. And that's where the referrals are going to roll in. And even for getting a job at an established agency, right? You want to be specialized in something, known for something, not someone who can treat everything, anxiety, depression, and whatnot. Of course, it's good to be educated and keeping up on current literature because you're no longer in school, right? So that's why they have continuing education requirements. But it's for me, there's only so much you can be specialized in. So it's good to hone it in. Like for me, I think I get a lot of quirky, fun teens. So when my colleagues do a consult or hear about a teen that's like a little socially awkward, loves video games, anime, and, all of those things, they're like, oh, we'll send this to Pim. And it ends up being
Exactly.
a really good fit.
Exactly. um, and you just graduated or you're just finishing up graduate school, and you might not know what that is yet. It took me a couple of years to figure out what kind of specialty or what kind of population that, I think is the best fit for me to work with and to get specialized training on it. So you might not know yet. You might not have worked with the population that you're supposed to be working with either yet. So be
Yeah,
open-minded to that.
exactly.
If you are, that's the thing is I was only used to working with kids as far as doing full-on therapy. And, I got jobs working with adults and I like working with both now. So be
Right.
open to it.
Yeah, and it can change, right? So even if you are specialized in something or have done something for so long doesn't mean that it has to stay that way forever. It's okay to want something new or different or fall in love with something else because I used to only do 0 to 5. I would only see the little ones for the longest time and that's all I would get. And then or like behavioral issues, that kind of stuff, autism. And I started seeing more teens and young adults. And now I am absolutely in love with working with college students and young adults too. And I get a lot of referrals for that as well. So, now I feel like I'm able to see a lot more clients too. It's
Right.
changed a
So
bit.
it's like being specialized in something and also being able to have a little bit of diversity in your caseload, right? I love that I have, women in their 50s that I'm working with, and I have, a 10-year-old that I'm seeing next week. So having that also keeps me, not so burnt out or they're different issues. There's a little bit of variety in my day to day. So it's not the same,
Mm-hmm.
same thing.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Anything else? Maybe non-clinical trainings. I think that's important to bring up because I feel like there's going to be so much continuing education courses out there on different clinical interventions or theories, all that good stuff. But I've always been recommended from other clinicians that have started their own practice, right? That they've taken like financial courses for therapists, right? Or how to do your taxes for therapists, courses on marketing, growing your practice, social media for therapists, for example. Those are also really, really good trainings to do because you don't get that stuff in grad school.
Right. It's totally glazed over and very crucial to our world now. Um, One other point I would like to make as far as when you're interviewing places, when you're accepting job offers, maybe even when you're leaving a position, be polite, be respectful, don't burn bridges. um,
Good
Mental
point.
health community is smaller than you think. We're actually in a pretty big city and a lot of people know people.
Right.
So you need to network. Everybody knows everybody and you have to have some references when you go to a new job. So try not to burn bridges and in a profession
Yes.
and your if you're quitting or leaving a position, like do it in a professional manner because people talk.
Yeah. People do. I've actually gotten asked quite a number of times by colleagues who are hiring and they see that a certain new associate recently graduated from our school, right? Like, hey, do you know this person? And they ask my advice on what do you think about them, and I'm able to say like, oh, I've taught their class, or I've seen them on campus before, this is all I know about them. So I've actually had people reach out about that before, or they've seen that like this person is interviewing with me now and they used to work at a place at this agency in the past, and I know someone from that agency, so I'm going to call them up and ask.
Right. Yeah. So just know that
Yeah,
people
play
talk,
nice.
people know. Yeah, be nice. And there are going to be jobs where the management's not amazing or the workload is really intense, and there might be jobs where you're like, this isn't for me. And maybe some unfairness can happen. I mean, it's the workplace, right? This is across the board in any field, but being respectful and doing it in a professional way, writing it in a letter or an email, having a paper trail for things, just some common sense interview stuff to remember. Don't be late, to the interview, that kind of stuff. And one of the other things to consider too, if you're planning on leaving a position or you got a better offer somewhere else and you're currently seeing clients, considering kind of how you're going to wrap up the end of sessions, how you're going to transition your clients. Are you going to leave them high and dry and be like, I'm out of here tomorrow, I'm not going to say bye to anybody? Or are you going to try and do like a warm handoff, right? And that might depend on where you are, but how you leave a company or a practice, it really does set the tone. So just kind of being mindful of that.
Yeah, good point. Not just how you get into a company, but leaving too. It's just as
Mm-hmm.
important. I think this is one of those fields where you build big, important relationships with people. So you can't just like quit your job and walk out. I mean, you could be very unethical.
Yeah, it's a little more challenging, right? Because as therapists, we are taught that this is a very special relationship with our clients. This is a very unique situation, unique relationship, and sometimes we're the only safe person that they
Right.
have. Um, Not saying you should stay somewhere for the sake of your client if it's not a good fit or you need to leave. It's not, you know what I mean? Not sacrificing yourself, but there's a tactful way of doing it,
Mhm.
right?
That's right. Anything else that we haven't touched on? Now what after you've graduated?
Um, I think that's it. The only other point is, keep up on the literature, keep up on reading, learning, because things do change in the field. There's so much that we have yet to, accomplish research wise as far as providing services. So stay up on it. And
Keep your brain
yeah,
fresh.
exactly.
Yeah. Stay up on things, meet with colleagues, network a lot. I think I think the same applies to the medical world, right? Where there's always things changing. And so that's why people attend conferences and continue to learn. Just because you're done with school doesn't mean you're done with learning. Unfortunately
Right.
not.
Very far from it, actually, from graduation until, you're a very seasoned therapist. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for you all. I'm so excited. I'm pumped. I remember I was just so happy to have like MA after my name, and it was just such an accomplishment. So not anyone can get a master's degree. It's very much a special thing. It's a privilege. It's a lot of hard work that you've put in and a lot of money you've put in. So definitely give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on Instagram and Facebook as usual at Burning the Couch, and feel free to email us. We would also love to hear any experiences that you may have had on graduating, anything that we haven't touched and you would like for us to cover. Email us at podcastbtc@gmail.com.